Hello everyone, welcome to a new video in our brand new series, Study Tips. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that is very important and very helpful during your studying, which is how to read and study from textbooks. So let's jump right into one of my textbooks. Let's first go with our calculus book. So one of the very first things that I would tell people, even before they start a semester or studying, and it would actually be of immense help, is if you want to understand how the book is based, meaning you really want to open the book and scroll. You don't have to study anything or anything like that. Maybe just read. So another thing that I want to mention is usually in the beginning of the book, sometimes it is written how to do with the book, like what's going on, how is this happening, and so on. See, you have here to the student, right? This is usually very important for you to read. It would actually explain to you how the book is based, like why is this written. I would recommend for anyone to read this before they start. If it's in a math, sometimes some books would have diagnostic tests too, so this is important. Another thing that is very important for you is content. Now, contents are important. You really want to know what's in the book in general, right? Usually the contents skip the beginning. Now, see here, you have the preface, you have to the students, you have the diagnostic test, and you have the lesson. At the end of each lesson, you would use in math, you would usually have exercises, and at the end of each chapter, you would have also exercises and reviews. And this is the same for everything. Let's look at the end of the book. Now, the beginning and the end of the book are usually of the biggest allies for you. In any book, in any subject, this is usually going to help you a lot. So as you see here in the appendixes, you have references. We also have references and we have answers to odd-numbered exercises. We also have references in the beginning of the book. Now we also have an index. The index, I just show it quickly. We just have names, like a certain name, like if you're trying to find something, like you're trying to find a vector, component, something like that, acceleration of a particle. You might want to maybe refer here. It would show you all the pages where it has this number. It's basically as if you were going on Microsoft Word and doing tapping the find and then writing the word. It's exactly the same thing. Exactly the same. This is just a word, but basically you have it in your book. We have also a reference page in the beginning. I'll show it real quick. That's the preface. It was in the very beginning, before even. Yes, there it is. We also have references here. So usually, as I said, the beginning and the end in any book is important. I would briefly show it in other books that I'm going to show in this video, but usually these are the biggest allies. You would have references for things that you might have taken before, but you need it maybe in a certain lesson. You would actually have it written there, so it's very helpful. As I said, contents are important for you to scroll through, understand how it's written. The part where it's to the students is also very, very important for you to see. Now, look at this. We have a preview of calculus. Sometimes there are previews, not, see each book to its own, but this is why I said the very beginning is very important for you to actually scroll through and understand, because it would explain how the book works. To the student is usually just something for you that it would actually advise you maybe to even go to your prof or your teacher, whoever is teaching you, your instructor, to go and ask and to search and so on. A preview of calculus here is giving you what is expected from you to understand It's basically showing you the big picture of basically what is calculus, and it's doing it in a fun way. You're still doing study and so on, and I would actually advise people to read this before they start. It usually gives you an idea of what you're going to be taking during the semester, so I would advise people to definitely go and see this. Now let's go through a lesson. Now I have this lesson, and yeah, so it's one of the basic lessons that you take in calculus. So let's actually start with something very important. The sidebars sometimes are not important if they are talking history. I mean, like if they're basically saying Isaac Newton did this and that, they're talking about a person. In that case, it isn't very important, but usually it is. You would have graphs in here, you would have comments talking about an exercise that was solved. So be aware of that area. As I'm saying, this is in any subject. This is not only in math, this is in all subjects. So if don't only think this is based on math because I'm opening a calculus book. This is based on all, right? So let's go to another thing. But obviously there's going to be differences between books in the content, obviously, right? Math is different than chemistry. So a function here, they're explaining it. So things that are written differently and set apart from the rest of the way that it's written, as you're seeing here in this box, right? Let's zoom it a bit. Here you go. Like in this dear box, you would have to know that this is really important, right? Things that are set apart from maybe other things, that means that this thing is really, really important. Like this is of the highest importance other than the other things. It doesn't mean the other things are not important, but this is just of the highest order of importance. As you're seeing here, usually to set things apart, definitions or important keywords, they would be in bold. Usually sometimes I would have some things in italics to signify certain important aspects of a concept. This is very important. So one of the things that I would actually advise on is have a paper next to you, and if you see something is important, maybe you could highlight it, which is great because when you go back you would actually be able to remember that you actually highlighted this as this is important. But at the same time you would be able to remember definitions, like by writing them you're going to completely be remembered. So now the reading in itself. Now it seems a bit daunting to maybe let's go on this page. So maybe I read all that. So one of the things when maybe I feel a bit daunted in reading would be I would read each sentence on its own. Like I would go like this is a sentence, then I'm reading it and I'm understanding it, and I'm just completely focused on it. So I'm not focused on how I'm reading. I'm not focused on, even if you're one of those people who like reading with their voice and so on, like not silent readers. It really doesn't matter how you're reading, how you're not reading. What is really matter is that you look at each sentence and you truly digest it. You truly okay, so let's maybe take this thing. It is helpful to think of a function as a machine. Okay, and then you stop, and then it tells you what figure 2, and then you go and look. Okay, that's figure 2. This looks like some sort of machine, and then this is the output, this is the input. Okay, so see, this is how you should be studying or how you should be reading. Okay, and then you saw the figure and then read it again because you wanna put the concepts in your head. It's not memorizing as much as sometimes when this is the first time you've taken maybe this subject, it would be a bit, you need to put a bit of the effort because you're still, receiving new information, right? As I said, see here it's bold. Figures usually highlight a lot of things. Some people are more or less visual, and figures are very important, so do not underestimate the figures. You can actually understand a concept not by the words, but by how it looks. That's very normal, right? uh, sorry about that. Okay, so we have here an exercise, right, and we have the solution. Now usually when we start studying, it's like we really don't maybe understand how it's done, so we're walking through how they're doing it. Usually I wouldn't advise for people, if they want extra resources to help them in understanding the concepts that are in the textbook, to actually have another textbook, because in that way you're confusing yourself and you wouldn't remember which book had this concept, and it would be very confusing. But however, I would advise for you to maybe go on YouTube on Khan Academy. I would link Khan Academies down if people really don't know. So this is what I would advise. Don't use another book, but use videos. Use because if you didn't understand it in a certain way, a book wouldn't be helpful if you try to understand. It would be even better if you used a YouTube video or something of that sort, or just even search on it online, rather than people might be able to obviously answer your query and where you don't understand. Also, another thing that I want to highlight, when during the lesson in any subject, chemistry, math, physics, you have exercises that are solved. This is really helping you to understand the actual concept, meaning that you have to genuinely understand these, like not even 100%, but like 1,000%. Have to very much understand. If you barely got anything out of the lesson, but these exercises, you actually just basically got everything you're supposed to know, right? So exercises here are very important, especially if you don't have time. So the exercises are important. Looking at the solution. Now usually you would look at the solution because maybe if this was the first time you're studying this subject, this concept, you really don't know how it's done. This is completely normal, but maybe after you finish, go and maybe solve them again, understand them, look where you're stopping. This is important, because during the test, you obviously don't have any resource for answers. You have to go and sit and study. So you have to go sit and you should have done that. You have to go and just solve at that point, right? You wouldn't have anything. So you have to know maybe where you're stopping and all that. Yes, it could be time consuming, I totally agree, but this is for the greater good. Usually, as I said, the examples, yes, these are important, theorems, things that, as I said, as you see it, this is simply just a page, and you're seeing that this is highlighted in a certain way, you know that this is of the highest importance, regardless of the other things. So they're also important, but this is still very much important. And then after we've finished the lesson, we would have exercise. So I want to tell this very clearly. Do not, if you're stuck on a certain exercise, do not dwell a lot on it. I would link down below a resource for solutions, but please, I would actually give this as an advice as someone who have done certain mistakes and they've actually learned from it. If you really, especially in, we're talking about things where you have to solve, like physics, math, even chemistry. You have to solve. You have to know how to solve, and you have to remember how to do the steps. So you got stuck. Imagine that's you in an exam, right? Not the first reaction you do is open the tab and look up, the answers. But genuinely try to understand it, look at it, because, in an exam, genuinely speaking, you're not going to have any help, and you need all the help in you. And at that point, all you should think about is, how can I solve this? After you feel like you've exhausted it, right? Also, don't try to elongate the time. Keep mindful of how long you're taking too, because you don't want to waste time on one question, right? After a time you feel like you've used it a lot, you have no idea, you're still not used to the concept, open the resource that I'm going to be linking down in the description and actually see it. Now, I'm not going to say anything other than sometimes it is not very accurate, and sometimes the way it's done is not very accurate. Usually there are actually students like us and like me and you, and they wouldn't maybe do it right, and that's completely normal, but this is just something to help you while you're stuck in certain concepts. Okay, so let's go to the review at the end of the chapter. Usually reviews are helpful as, you know, you finished the whole thing and they're recapping it. So you have the concept check. Concept checks are important for you if you really wanna, you know, remember what you were doing and so on, and explain it, because see, it's literally asking what's a function, what are a domain and range. See, remember this what we got in the first lesson. These are usually just important for you to really know where you are in understanding and be truthful when you're doing it. So it's very important. Sorry about that. A true or false quiz too is important. They're very, you'd think that they're not, you don't do a critical analysis from this, but this is very critical analysis. Okay, these are the exercises. So for the most part, these exercises are kind of random. This is why I would tell people, if you wanna solve, you know, in math and all that, and you wanted to look as close to the exam, it would be better if you're doing the exercises at the end of the chapter. Why? Because it's a mixture of all lessons, so it's not like in a certain order, right? And this is usually very helpful if you want to imitate the exam conditions. Now, usually things like principles of problem solving, they are important. Like even if they're gonna take time from you, things like that's in the book are extremely helpful. Like maybe they're not in every part of the book, but it is helpful in you, in like basically you're programming, you're wiring yourself into thinking into a different approach than what you have been taken. So as I said, this is important, and it's very helpful. Right, let's go on another book, chemistry. Now, chemistry, you're also solving, you also have formulas, even theorems, and I would advise for you to write them on paper, highlight, you know, you want them to stick to you for some time, right? You also have a note to the student, you have like brief contents, these go through them, they're very important. One thing that I want to talk about in chemistry specifically would actually be the glossary. Now, you always have definitions, but there's a trick that I used in the definitions is going to the glossary. Now, in the glossary, you would obviously have definitions normally and all of that in your book, but in the glossary, they are smaller. Okay, so let's zoom in and see. They're smaller, and they're usually to the point. Like, you feel like they're not sugarcoating. It's like every single thing that's written here is important, and they are to the point. So like this is very, you know, helpful, and it helped me specifically in chemistry, in biology, and sometimes even in physics if you have it in physics. So this is like, you know, very helpful. As I said, let's look at maybe the contents, because it might seem a bit hard. Let's take a random coordination compound. Now I have no idea what is that. Now it might seem like you're looking a little over these. Now remember this, these, not every sentence you're reading is of extreme importance, right? But this is basically you're reading to understand. So even if it's taking time from you to read, sometimes I would tell people like finish, I don't know, several ideas of a chapter. Sometimes they would write, you know, a subtitle to the main title. You could and summarize it. It would be, you know, very helpful. Now another thing that I wanted to show here is we have key equations, right? Key equations. Now key equations are helpful, but sometimes not all of them are written there. So be aware of that, because this could make you fall in a mistake. We have the summary of facts and concepts, and this is something that I would genuinely tell, do not read it, do not study from it. If you have finished, you know, studying and you're just reviewing, you know, you're not taking any information, you're not understanding from it, this is just a summary. So you have to treat it as that. You have to treat it as something that you finished, you know, looking at all the concepts in the lessons, and then in the end you would look at it. Other than that, otherwise do not study from it. Like, this is just something that, you know, I wanted to highlight. keywords, this is usually helpful if maybe while you're reading you missed certain definitions. It's helpful to go back. Problems, just don't really spend too much time. Try to this is a problem that I might have done. Like, look at the titles. Sometimes look at the titles of the questions and the problems. You're gonna see different titles, and these are the titles of the lessons in the chapter. So please be aware of that, because you might have spent an hour, but these are all in one lesson and not all the other lessons. So please be aware of that. So let's go in physics. Now, physics and chemistry are not much of a difference. In chemistry, you're more inclined to the concepts. In physics, you have to understand the concepts, so you're usually using different things. But in both chemistry and physics, you have to really look at the units, especially when you're solving. You have to look, oh, this is a joules per, kilometers. You have to really look at these things. You have to be very aware of them. And as I said, write them down. So obviously you're taking lecture notes and so on. So your lecture notes are valuable, but do not completely trust them, as they are they are of no error. They probably have some errors, so please be understanding of this. Okay, so the measurements, sometimes, usually in the beginning, professors, they don't give you this chapter, as they see it as something that is not of importance, but usually things like conversion of units and significant figures are important, because they're expecting you to apply it when you're solving. So it's very important that even though your professor or teacher did not go through it, you go through them, because they would be very much needed. As I said, each book is different. As you see here, there's no note to students, and there isn't references here, but we have references and appendixes and all of that in the back. Now, I might have not talked about the answers to odd numbers. Usually the answers to odd numbers is just the final answer. It's not steps, it's not anything, but usually this is just helping you while you're solving and so on. It makes you more competent in that sense, that you've solved and you see just the final answer, and so you would be able to track your mistakes, debug your mistakes while you're solving. Another important thing here is, see, you have indexes, you have appendixes. They're also, as I said, very important. Usually sometimes you have references, so it depends whether some references could be in the beginning, at the end. It depends on the book itself and how your book is. So this is very, these are some of the tips that have genuinely aided me during studying in school and in university. And one last thing that I would advise on would be start early on, because when you're studying via reading, which is how it's supposed to be usually, it would take a bit more time. So I would advise for you to actually study early on, just so you would save yourself from the anxiety or the stress that you would get if you don't have as much time to solve, to read, and so on. And thank you for listening and watching. Please subscribe, and please leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.